Hello everyone, my name is Valerie Pierce and I'm the Retail Marketing Director at Sourcebooks. I'm so thrilled that I have the opportunity to chat with you about some of my favorite winter and spring picks that are coming out very soon. And before I get started, just a quick thank you to Carol Fitzgerald at The Book Reporter and to Austin as well. This is a lot of work to put this together and I know that I appreciate it and I'm sure that every single person listening right now appreciates it as well. So without further ado, are you ready to hear about some books? I'm going to take that as yes. My first book is The Arctic Fury by Greer McAllister. This is a fantastic historical fiction, and to sort of set the scene, I'm going to ask you guys, have you heard of The Terror, a TV show on AMC, or are you familiar with the British expedition that tried to see its way through the Arctic Circle? If not, spoiler alert, it was a huge failure. Everybody perished, and for years no one knew what had happened to everybody. So this story posits that Lady Jane Franklin, who was the wife of the commander-in-chief of that expedition, decides that she's tired of all the men trying to figure out what happened to her husband. So she hires a group of ragtag women explorers to go up to the Arctic and to find her husband and the rest of the crew. Now, this is a very, as I said, a ragtag group. They're very different. They come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and there are definitely a lot of personalities that clash, which is not necessarily safe when you're in the Arctic. So as the reader, we get to hear two different time periods throughout the book. One is when they're starting on their expedition, and two is when the leader of the group, Virginia, is on trial for murdering one of the women while they're up on the ice. So it's a thrilling story. You get a lot of historical detail that is actually correct because Greer does an amazing job with her research. But we also just get this really thrilling historical thriller that you don't know what really happened out there and you want to know more. So that book comes out in December, and I can share with you that it is an indie next pick. So make sure you get that from your local bookstore. My second book comes out in February, and it's called Black Widows by Kate Quinn. This is perfect for people who love domestic thrillers, especially if you love things with a little bit of a unique hook. So in this one, it starts off with Blake Nelson, a man who's been murdered, and the authorities who are quite sure that his wife killed him. The only problem is, which one? Because Blake is a polygamist and he has 3 wives. And while they all may have loved him at one point in time, they certainly don't like him very much right before his death. And every single one of them had the opportunity to do it. So please make sure to check this one out. It is thrilling, it is different. You get the perspective of all 3 of the wives, who are, as I said, very different. One is the perfect polygamist wife, or so she wants you to think. One is a naive young woman who may also be incredibly manipulative. And one of them is a world-weary woman who lived on the streets of Las Vegas, a former drug addict. So these 3 women, very different, have to figure out together who killed Blake, while also trying to wonder if it was actually one of them. I have one more book coming out in February. It's called The Engineer's Wife, and this is actually the trade paper version of the hardcover, which came out in April of 2020. But I wanted to make sure to mention this one because trade paper is perfect for book clubs, and because I think a lot of us missed a lot of really great books that came out in April of 2020 because of the pandemic. This book is about Emily Warren Roebling. She was a woman who basically helped engineer, construct, organize, fund, and put together the Brooklyn Bridge. And yes, I said the woman. When she marries Washington Roebling in the 1860s, she expects to mostly be a society wife. But when her father-in-law dies in a freak accident on the Brooklyn Bridge that he's putting together, and then her husband gets incredibly ill, she's the only person in the family who can take on this contract. And the family will be bankrupt if she doesn't. So she spends the next 19 years of her life learning engineering, which is difficult since there are no schools for that for women, of course, during that time. Figuring out how to deal with the politicians, figuring out how to deal with the workers. Everything you can think of, she had to do. She bore that burden. And what I love about this story too is that there are so many current issues that she deals with. Work-life balance, dealing with a husband where suddenly she's the breadwinner, quote unquote. All of that is stuff that Emily deals with in this story, and I think will really resonate with current readers. It's perfect for readers of Marie Benedict, so please make sure to check that one out. I have one last fiction story to tell you about. This one comes out in April. It's a debut. It is called The Girls in the Stilt House by Kelly Mustaine. This is perfect for readers of Where the Crawdads Sing, and If the Creek Don't Rise, and even Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. It takes place in Mississippi. It's about 2 young women who are very different. They come from very different racial backgrounds, but they're both on the lower end of the socioeconomic platform. They're both struggling. They're both determined to get out of this small town, away from everything that's held them back. And then a murder happens. A murder that brings them together in unexpected ways. A murder that brought them together in a way that nothing ever could, because they were so different. And they both work together to try to get out of this small town. So that one, as I said, comes out in April in trade paper. And then I have two great narrative nonfictions that I want to tell you about. The first one is Footnotes by Cassine Gaines, who's a journalist. I love narrative nonfiction that tells me stories that I've never heard of before. And what Footnotes does is it tells the story of Shuffle Along, which was the first all-Black created, produced, and acted show or musical on Broadway. When we begin the story, we begin with the producers sitting backstage on the first night, and they're terrified. They have no idea how the audience is going to react to this. They're ready to have to run from a mob, but what happened is everybody loved it. What happened is that it changed the face of the world for the acting community and for the producing community. The 100th anniversary is May 25th, which is when we're publishing the book. So there will be a huge celebration. The author is in touch with the family members of the original producers and actors from Shuffle Along, and I just think it's a story that everyone should know and celebrate. And then last but not least is The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore. Yes, Kate Moore, the author of The Radium Girls, she is back. If you've read her before, you know that she is just a phenomenal writer. She has a way of telling a narrative nonfiction story that makes you feel like you're reading a fictional thriller. So in The Woman They Could Not Silence, it is about Elizabeth Packard. When we enter the story, it is June 18th, 1860, and it's the day everything changes for her. Before then, she'd been the perfect wife. She was renowned as a cook. She was a beloved mother. Again, almost a perfect wife, except for the fact that she disagreed with her husband. She didn't agree with his politics. She certainly didn't agree with his religion. And that was cause for him to put her into an asylum. And during that time, it was absolutely legal for a man to put his wife into an asylum and to keep her there for as long as he wanted. But he misunderstood Elizabeth. He thought that would break her, but it didn't. It just made her stronger. So eventually she gets out, she takes him to court, and she proves that to the United States of America that women should be allowed to make their own decisions about whether they're going to a mental institution. And she eventually also fights for the rights of women to retain custody of their children as well. So she changed the world as we know it. The Woman They Could Not Silence comes out in June. And those are my books. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope you have a wonderful day.